We're at a critical point in our model. We've developed most of the first floor, and now we really need to organize it so that we can create the second floor. You need to use groups. In this chapter, I'm going to show you how to create groups. We'll also show you how to create the second floor, use some techniques like the outliner, use layers, and also show you how to use scenes to create different views and layer states so that you can effectively work on the first floor or the second floor or in any area of the house. This is usually the moment where SketchUp users get the most frustrated. They've modeled a lot of the building and they go to put on a second floor or make changes to the first floor, and all their geometry is connected. So if I take the select tool, you can see how everything is touching, everything's connected. So if I go to add the second floor and I begin creating the walls of the second floor or even cut out some of the elements, all this geometry is touching. If I ever need to move anything, say we have a wall here, I pull this up. If I ever need to move this, it's very difficult because everything is touching. And it's really hard to select if we go left to right when we select this. We're also selecting items on the first floor. And we don't want that. We want the first floor to be on its own, and we want the second floor to be on its own. And in SketchUp, you do that by creating groups. So let's undo, get back to here where we were, and let's take the select tool, select a window around the entire model from left to right, go to Edit, and make it a group. Let me just undo. You can also select from left to right and right-click on your selection. Don't right-click out here, right-click on your selection and select Make Group. So now with the first floor as a group, when I go to click on it, you'll notice I get a box and it highlights the entire model blue. That lets us know that it's one object. And now I can draw on top of this or even inside of this. But it keeps all of our walls separate. We want to keep all those walls nice and clean because when we add things like windows and doors, we don't want that geometry connected because if we need to move an opening, it's one more piece that's difficult to grab or pull. And for our second floor, it makes it easy just to draw a rectangle and push-pull the second floor up. So let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to create some of the second floor. Time to create the second floor. Here, we don't need to create the entire second floor. For this demonstration and training, we just want to create the hallway and the master bedroom because we're going to walk through later in an animation that's going to walk you down the stairs or back up it. Plus, we want to create the staircase and the railing for the staircase. We're going to use the Follow Me tool. So we need some of the hallway to actually create that framework and starting point. Unlike the first floor, what we're going to do for the second floor, remember we have this as a group already. So we're just going to take the rectangle tool and we're going to draw out the footprint of the second floor right on top of the first floor. So I'm measuring out the inside dimensions there. And for the second floor, the inside dimensions are actually just to the inside here of the dining room. So I'll measure that out as well. Next, let's take the Move tool and move this face up. The second floor is 13 inches higher than the finished ceiling line of the first floor. Let's go ahead and move this area up as well. Let's take the Move tool, move this face up in the blue axes. I don't want to move it up 13 inches because remember this finish line is a little bit lower. Instead, we're going to press the up arrow to lock in the blue axes. And we're going to infer to our other height here. Now see that weird glitch that SketchUp does where it flips the face? So this face it did correct, this face it didn't. You can reverse that. First, let's move this over in the green axis till it snaps there. And let's just take the eraser and erase that edge. That way, we have the basis of our plan here. Now, like the first floor, let's offset those walls. And we're going to offset them 6 inches. Next, let's start in the bottom left-hand corner here with our measurement. These are inside dimensions, remember. Our first measurement is 146 inches. So instead of drawing that, we're going to use the tape measure tool with the plus sign. Turn on that little plus sign there. That's going to give you the guide. type in 146 inches. And going this way, we're going to use the tape measure tool again and draw our points. So in this case, 25 inches, 31.5 inches, 55.5 inches, and 31.5 inches again. Those are the two windows. Next, just take the line tool, draw the line, break up the master bedroom. This line you can actually draw all the way back. The thickness of the wall here is 5 inches. Let's go ahead and draw a guide, 5 inches. And let's draw that line all the way across the hallway there. Before we delete these guides, let's just go ahead and draw the lines in for our windows. And now we can go to Edit, Delete Guides to remove those. Now we can do the hallway. We want to take the tape measure tool again. And this time we want to go out 35.5 inches. And then we want to go with the line tool, 1.5 inches, then 36 inches, and then 7.5 inches. Then bring that line over. Take the guide again. The hallway here is 34 inches. Now take the line tool, draw 16 inches, then the doorway is 30.5, and then it's 174 inches to this wall right here. Then it's 18 inches, 34 inches, 24-inch door. It's a really narrow door to the bathroom. Then it's a really narrow trim to the other door here. So it's 1.5 inches. Then you have 1.5 inches this way. Then a 30-inch door, and then the remaining wall here. Our opening length here is 82.5 inches. So let's take a guide from this point here, draw down 82.5, and now let's go ahead and cut out this area here. So if I use the rectangle tool, you could use the line tool. You could draw a line from here to here, and then here to here. I prefer to use the rectangle tool in this case because it's just a 2-click. Let's offset this wall so that we have the walls that we can extrude up. Take the select tool and select all of the lines along this edge. Now you may have to zoom in close to get some of these because remember there's the 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches there. We can't use offset and just offset the entire face. It's too many pieces to select. So just be careful where you're clicking. And if you do click the face by accident, like I've done, just hold down Shift and deselect it. We have them all selected. Take the offset tool and offset this 5 inches. So now that we have all the inside walls and the outside walls of the second floor drawn up, our next step is to now extrude the interior walls and cut out the opening for the staircase. That way we can start creating some of the interior elements within the house. With the walls traced, we can now push-pull to extrude the walls and the openings on the second floor. Before we do that, let's just delete the guides that we have in the model. Remember, it's Edit, Delete Guides. It's going to remove all of our guides. Now the walls are 107 inches towards the master bedroom, and the whole rooftop actually slopes down towards the back of the house. For our purposes, let's just push the exterior wall up to 107 inches. We can double click on this face here, push pull that wall up, double click here as well, double click here. Take the select tool and just select the inside face here and press delete. That's going to give us the start of our opening here. Now the hallway closet here, let's take the select tool, pre-select these edges, and that one too. Remember we created that little 3 lines there. Take the offset and offset this 5 inches, and then push pull to bring the wall up. This wall here for the closets, let's just push this up. We're not going to worry too much about the detail in there. We're just going to add 3 doors to the front of this. For the windows here, another way that you can extrude the faces here to create the window openings is by push-pulling this first distance, just 36 inches. Let's repeat it here, 36, double click. And now for the opening, push-pull plus Option on a Mac or Control on a PC. See how it brings up that little plus sign again? If we push pull this up 51 inches, that's our window size opening. Do the same thing here. See how it deactivates? Click it back on with Option or Control and push this up all the way. That's another way that we can essentially trace out our window openings. And now we can just push pull this through, double click, and then of course take the eraser and just do some cleanup here, just to clean up some of our edges. Now it will create those on the front as well, so let's erase those. And the house is coming along. We got our second floor. We'll deal with the gap here in a little bit. We need this doorway here. Let's draw this door another way. What we've done here is we've created the opening, and I forget how wide this was. So let's take the measurement. We can see it's 34 inches. So we would need to draw a line 2 inches and then 2 inches and then draw our rectangle. Or another way we could do this is draw our first guide, the tape measure tool, 2 inches. Then take the rectangle tool, start at that intersection, click once to start your rectangle. And now as we draw the rectangle, notice in the value control box our distance. What we want to do is type in the width first and then the height. So let's type in 30, 78 and press enter. That's going to give us our opening so that we can now just push pull till we intersect. Should be 5 inches. Now it does leave that little line there, and that's okay. If we want, we can erase that. We'll erase this line here. For this doorway, it's the same height, but we're going to create this a different way. We're going to use the Move tool plus Option on a Mac or Control on a PC. We're going to copy this line up. We could type in 78 inches, or we could press the up arrow, lock in the blue axes, and just infer to our height over here. Once again, take push pull that through, and then eraser to erase your edges. Same thing here, move copy, 78, push pull, and then eraser. Really, the key to make this go quickly is to use your keyboard shortcuts. I always keep my left hand on home row, so my left hand's on ASDF on the keyboard. The reason why I do that is a lot of the tools are coming right off of there. So you have R for rectangle, E for erase, T for tape measure. More importantly, you have Shift and Option that you'll frequently go to in your left hand there that you can use. Also, spacebar is the select tool. That's a good one to always use your thumb on and click on. Now these two doors, I'm just going to take the select tool, select these two lines with Shift, and I'll use Move plus Option and bring this up 78 inches, push pull, which is P, double click, and then E for erase. You can quickly cut these out and clean these up. So we have all the openings now completed. We're just going to do a little bit more cleanup. And next, I'm going to show you all the different ways that you can organize this model. So that includes using field of view to zoom and actually be able to view your model a little bit easier. It includes hide rest of model, the outliner, using layers, and creating scenes. Two tools that I use a lot to organize and view my model are hide and hide rest of model. By default, SketchUp makes the hide tool Command E. And to be quite honest, I don't like Command E as that shortcut. Instead, I want to change it to H. So when I select an object, I want to press H and make it hide. When I press H right now, our keyboard shortcut is the pan tool. That really doesn't make much sense because I use Orbit plus Shift to pan. And H is a close key for my left hand, so we can make that H to be hide. And for hide rest of model, we're going to make it Control H. That'll make sense in a little bit. To change your shortcut, you want to go to Window, Preferences on a PC, or on a Mac, you want to go to SketchUp, Preferences. On the left, you'll see Shortcuts, And here it lists all the functions in SketchUp. So this is where you can access any tool and make your own keyboard shortcuts. To make this a little bit easier, let's just filter. So we'll type in hide. Hide comes up, and the screen's a little different on a PC. Actually, on a PC, you can save out your keyboard shortcuts, whereas on a Mac, you can only save them on this computer. PC, you could actually export the shortcut file so that you can load it on other computers. So here, hide comes up. You'll see there's no keyboard shortcut set for it. So let's set it by typing H. Gives us a warning saying that the shortcut H is already assigned to camera pan, and we want to replace that. Now the other keyboard shortcut that I like to use is unhide all, and for that I'm going to use the letter U. The last one that we want is this view component edit hide rest of model, and for this I use Control H. However, you can use any other keyboard shortcut that you want. This is just the one that I've always used for it. Once we're done, just press the little red circle there, close out. Shortcuts you only have to set once. So next time you load up your SketchUp model, those shortcuts will load. To use hide rest of model, let's say for example, we just want to focus on the second floor. With the first floor grouped, I can click on it, just single click, and I can press H to hide it. Now we can just focus on the second floor. To unhide it, just press U, and that unhides all the geometry in your model. Now, if you don't have the keyboard shortcut set up, you can always get to those under Edit, and then Hide and Unhide All. To continue organizing this model and show you how hide rest of model works, let's first make the second floor a group. To do that, let's triple click, single click selects the face, double click selects the face and edges, and a triple click selects all the entities in your selection. So anything that's touching that selection. So let's right click and make this a group. And while we're here, let's also change another keyboard shortcut. Let's go to SketchUp Preferences, and let's type in Group, because Make Group, I want to set that as G. By default, G is set up for components, which we haven't touched yet. However, I use groups more often than I use components, so I like G as groups, and it just makes more sense. Let's just undo Command Z or Control Z on a PC. Let's select all again, and then now just press G, and it'll create that group for us. Groups just select the geometry, they isolate it, and now you want to be able to modify or edit inside that geometry. So to do that, you can double click with the select tool to enter inside of a group, and you'll see the boundary or edges of that group defined by this area. You'll also notice it ghosts out the first floor, and that's because it's not in that group. Where hide rest of model comes into play is if you press Control H, which again we set up as our keyboard shortcut, you can now hide anything not inside this group that we're drawing right now. So anything outside, or in a sense, the rest of the model is hidden. And I like this as Control H because I'll toggle this on and off. There will be times where you need to refer to geometry outside of your group, but also times where you just want to hide it. Take the select tool and just click out of the group, and your model returns there. Same thing if I'm on the first floor, I can double click, and right now I have it activated, so it's going to hide that. If I want to bring the second floor back on, just Control H, or hide it again, Control H. To edit any geometry within a group, you have to make sure that you're inside of that. So you have to make sure that you're inside the bounding edges of that group. So we'll eventually have more groups within groups, especially when we create the windows and door trim. Another tool that you can use to organize is the outliner, and we're going to show you that next. The outliner tool is one of those hidden tools in SketchUp. For me, I never really used it, never really knew it was there. It's really a great tool. It helps you view any of your groups and components and creates a hierarchy or a tree of any groups or components that you have nested. To get to it, you can go to Window, Outliner, and it brings up this little palette here. So 505 is the name of our SketchUp file. So that's Chapter 5, Section 5. And what you'll see here is two definitions with the little black square. And that, if you click on it, is a representation of the group that we have. So rather than calling this group, we can actually rename this all the way at the bottom here. Let's drag this over a little bit. Call this second floor. And we can rename the other one. Call this first floor. And it's great if you have a very large complex model. Instead of trying to click through geometry, you can simply just double click on the title in the outliner and it'll open whichever group or component that you're clicking on. You can hide groups, you can lock groups, you can explode them, convert them into components, and other right click or context click elements that you would get normally if you right click on the object itself. They're all here as well. You'll have a little details icon as well, which this is really the details icon in SketchUp. We'll see this in other tools. It'll allow you to either expand or collapse, and then you can also sort by name. So Outliner definitely has its uses. There are times where I certainly don't use it at all because I have small models and don't really need to click on these. But I certainly use it a lot for larger, more complex models. If you're familiar with Revit or with BIM models, importing a Revit model into SketchUp, it's very challenging to change textures. So I use Outliner here to actually select all the groups that are transparent, so they could be glass. And then I just make material changes using Outliner versus having to click on each individual component or definition as it was defined in Revit. So again, Outliner, really great to use just to organize your model and kind of see what you got going on. Some other great tools that you can use are layers, and we'll get into that next. Before we use layers and create visibility options for the first floor and the second floor, let's just pan over, and I want to show you why we only use layers to control visibility and why layers don't control geometry. So first thing, always want to make sure that the blue little dot here is always on layer 0. That's going to show the layer that is currently active, and you always want to draw on layer 0. And this is exactly why in this example. Let's just draw a rectangle, and let's just draw some circles. We're going to make some cheese here, Swiss cheese. All right, so we got some circles here. Let's add a new layer. Click the little plus sign. We're just going to call it layer 1. And again, always make sure that layer 0 is your active layer. And let's say we're modeling this Swiss cheese and we want to make the holes a different layer. So we'll double click, hold down Shift. We'll select all of them. To change layers in SketchUp, we want to go to Window, Entity Info. You actually don't use this palette. It's a weird thing in SketchUp. You can't change object layers in the Layers palette. You actually have to change them in Entity Info. If you try and click here, that's not changing the layer of your selection. You have to do it in Entity Info. So in the drop-down panel here, go to Layer 1. Entity Info, as we explained a little bit earlier, is your properties of your object. So in this case, you see the entities that you're selecting. But remember, when we were looking at arcs and curves, you could change the number of sides or segments in it, and so on. And let's go ahead and just turn off layer 1. The big reason why we use groups or components to control geometry is since these aren't groups or components, when I go to draw a new object, maybe on top of this, I'm going to get this warning. And it's telling me your recent operation has caused visible geometry to merge with existing geometry on a hidden layer. Even though the holes of our Swiss cheese are hidden, you can still interrupt or affect that geometry because we're drawing on top of it. To avoid this from happening, you want to make your objects groups, and you only want to use layers to control visibility. So if we in fact wanted the Swiss cheese to basically be separate, what we'll do is right click and make it a group. And then that group will assign to layer 1. So that now we can turn that off. And if we draw on top of it, we're only affecting the geometry here. Our other geometry is grouped and it's separate. Let's just delete all this, delete our group, move back to our model, because for visibility, we're going to keep a layer 0, but for layer 1, we're going to double click on it and call this first floor. We're going to create a new layer called second floor. And then we're just going to click on our group of the second floor, assign it to the second floor layer. Click on the first group, assign it to the first floor layer. And now you can see we can turn these on and off. We'll eventually add more layers like furniture. Sometimes you want to just turn all your furniture off, your ceiling layers, your roof layer. And if you get into real specific detail, you could turn your people on and off. You can also use layers in conjunction with scenes. And let's take a look at scenes in the next section. In this video, we're going to take a look at scenes in SketchUp. Scenes provide various ways in which you can view your model. You can save scenes that allow you to control things like camera location, hidden geometry, layer states, and shadow settings. To view scenes in your model, you want to go to Window, Scenes. It's going to bring up another tool palette. You'll notice we'll have a lot of these tool palettes up in our model, and they can be pretty distracting, especially the ones that we're not using actively. Easy way to hide some of these is just click on the name or anywhere up in this top bar here, and it'll hide that palette. You can also dock them together, and you'll feel it snap as you dock those. So the scene palette by default saves a couple of parameters or settings for your model. To view those, you want to click on this little icon here, which is Show Details, and you'll notice some of those advanced properties that it saves. For example, you can use a scene to save a specific axis location. So this is great if you have a model that is maybe off axis on certain geometry. You can save shadow settings for specific scenes. You can save visible layers that you want either on or off. Same with geometry. And of course, you can save the camera location. Let's create a few scenes that we're going to use as a basis to begin modeling from, and as a way to actually revert back to different views and different layer states that we want to look at when we're viewing our model. The first one would be the overall model here. And what we can do is just click on the ISO view and maybe orbit a little bit to get an overall view that we like. And this one's pretty good. I'll click the plus sign to add a scene. You'll see it creates a thumbnail image. You could add a description, but it also creates a tab here. On a PC, you'll notice the tabs will start on the left. On a Mac, the tabs start in the center here. Now you can view scenes either as thumbnail images like this, or which I prefer, I just like to view them as a list. So our first scene, we're going to rename. So we're going to click on the name here and just rename this overall and press enter. The next scene that we want to create is just the first floor. So there's two ways that we could do this. We could either use the property of the hidden geometry and just hide the second floor, or we can use the layers, turn off the second floor, which is what I prefer doing. And let's actually view this in a top view. So let's click on the top view here. So you can see we can view our model from a top view. If you want to view this as a true top view in 2D, you can actually go to Camera, and instead of Perspective, click Parallel Projection. Now it'll get us a true 2D view of our model. If you orbit, turns your model into a parallel projection. To get it back into perspective, just go back to Camera and turn on Perspective. Click Top View again. We'll keep this in 3D and we'll add a scene. Let's call this first floor. Let's turn on the second floor, turn off the first floor, and let's add this scene. Call this second floor. Now to view between scenes, all you have to do is click on the scene here, or you can double click on it in the scenes palette. If you need to update a scene, let's say the overall, I want to orbit just a little bit and save this as my view instead. To update it, you simply need to either click on it here and press the update icon, or a quicker way, and the one that I prefer, is just right click on the tab here and select update. Now for the first floor and second floor, instead of getting this top view, let's just set it so that these control the layers, but not the camera location. This is a great feature that I like to use in SketchUp. So for the first floor, I want to show the first floor, but I don't want to save the camera location. So I'll uncheck it and press update. For the second floor, let's do the same thing. So that now when we orbit, if I click on the first floor, regardless of where my camera location is, it's just going to switch between those layer states. So in this case, these scenes are not dependent on the camera location. However, the overall is, because we still have it selected there. It's a great way that you can use scenes to organize the model and really just be able to view some of your elements. The next section that we'll show you is using scenes with field of view to better view your model. The field of view in SketchUp is the angle at which you are viewing the model. You can think of it in degrees, or you can think of it like a camera in focal length or millimeters. By default, if you click on the zoom tool and look in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that the default field of view is 30 degrees. And that's typical. That's a good starting point for your field of view in SketchUp. 30 degrees is good for exterior models, but as you move closer inside the model, especially in a small model like the one we're drawing, walls tend to close in quickly on you because we're only viewing this 30 degrees. To adjust our field of view, all you have to do is click on the zoom tool and type in the new field of view, which for interiors, I usually like to start at 60 degrees. So type in 60 and press enter. And notice what that does. It doubles our field of view. That way we can see twice the amount of the model. Let's just dock these. For the rest of the model, I would really like to stay in 60 degrees because it's going to allow us to really walk through our model and see inside the small space as well as the narrow and long corridor of the house. So as I mentioned, you can view this in field of view, or you can look at it in focal length. I like photography, so I try to think in focal length. For this specific illustration, let's say we wanted a rendering of the exterior here, and we wanted it at 35 millimeters. To change it, let's type in 35 mm and press enter. And notice how it changes the field of view now to say focal length, and it gives us the millimeter amount. So if you want a real wide angle shot, you would use something like a 10 millimeter lens. So you can type in 10 here and press enter. Nice wide angle shot. Probably way too exaggerated to work from. 35 is usually a good point there. If you want a real close up, you can do something like 50 millimeters or even 100. The model tends to get a lot flatter, so your building tends to get a little bit more flat. If you need to get back to field of view, just type in 60, and instead of millimeters or mm, type in DEG and press enter, and it'll revert back to field of view. Great thing about these field of views is you can save them as scene settings as well. It's going to be saved in the camera location. So since we saved the overall view before at 30 degrees, let's save this one at 60. So we'll add a new scene. And just as a reference, let's just type in 60 DEG. And now if we go to the overall view, you can actually watch the bottom right and watch how that goes from 30 up to 60. Again, a great way to use scenes as well as use our field of view. That pretty much concludes all of the ways that we can organize the model. And now we can do more of the fun stuff like creating the floors and ceilings and additional geometry within the house. So in the next chapter, we're going to create some of the floors and apply some textures to them.